A telltale sign that you're tolerating something is you're not willing to talk about it. You can't get authority over things you're tolerating. The less rationalism you have, the more powerful you're going to be. So don't tie yourself to what's realistic or what's rational. Thoughts only exist in a partnership. So when we are living our thoughts, there's no partnership. There's just rule. But when you observe your thoughts, the thoughts naturally come into alignment with your programming.
What if you could build a business in the modern world as big or as small as you want without having to compromise the things that were the most important to you in the very beginning? This is the Wealthy Consultant Talks podcast with Taylor Welch and Mike Walker, as they share with you today their learning lessons from stories in their experiences over the past 10 to 15 years and share with you right here, right now. Let's get into it.
Like you just wake up, you feel a little bit insecure, or this is a good one. Somebody you follow on social media, they just win all the time. All they seem to do is win. And you're like, what's wrong with me? Why am I not winning? Do me a quick favor. Let's do some research analysis. When's the last time you felt a limiting belief, and what was it? Drop it in the chat. The reason that I have people do this, and you'll feel this if you're coming to October. I mean, chamber clients already know this. We do it all the time. But a telltale sign that you're tolerating something is you're not willing to talk about it. It's a telltale sign. People are like, I'm not going to put myself out there. I don't want to talk about it. It's kind of embarrassing. It doesn't feel good. And there's a telltale sign that you're tolerating, and you can't get authority over things you're tolerating. So if you're not willing to talk about it, well, you're stuck with it. Nothing I can do to go in and control your hands or your mouth. I'm not a rational person. I don't want to be a rational person. Rationality is going to create average. So the more unrealistic something is, the less rational it's going to be. And the less rationalism you have, the more powerful you're going to be. So don't tie yourself to what's realistic or what's rational. Let's talk about these thoughts real fast, because what we need to actually do, and we won't go all the way into this, but we're going to go through just a couple different exercises today to kind of warm us up and prep us for this, because in psychology, people deal with this all the time. The brain you have is naturally designed for certain things. So when you know what the brain is supposed to be doing, when you know why it's doing what it's doing, you can legitimately go in and observe it. So let me just go off on a rant for a second. There's this process in behavioral psychology called cognitive diffusion. What cognitive diffusion is it's this idea of separating yourself from your thoughts. So thoughts are real things. They're not just in your head and imagination. Thoughts are actually electronic signals that are kind of rolling through your brain. So your brain's actually observing everything that's happening in the natural and the supernatural. Your brain's connected into this supernatural realm, just like it's connected into the natural. Your brain is kind of a bit of a portal. It's kind of operating in multiple spheres at the same time. Cognitive diffusion is the process of separating yourself from a thought so you can just observe it. This is why meditation is a thing. This is why people rave about mindfulness meditation. They're legitimately just observing their thoughts. And when you observe something, that thing you're observing changes just from the presence of observation. This is not just thoughts. This is light. This is energy. This is sound. Think about music for a second. Music is a partnership. There's no song without a listener. True or false?
True.
And there's no song without a musician. True or false? So music is this partnership. Music doesn't exist without a partnership. There's got to be two parties. There can't just be one. And when a piece of music comes through and you begin to observe it, you begin to feel differently. You ever turned on a song and you feel amazing, or you feel emotional, you feel sad, or you feel happy? That's the partnership effect of music. So thoughts are the same way. Thoughts only exist in a partnership. So when we are living our thoughts, there's no partnership. There's just rule. But when you observe your thoughts, the thoughts naturally come into alignment with your programming. So if you ever want to know what is my programming, so we'll have these events. We're going to do it in 2 weeks, and people are like, they expect me to teach for 8 hours, but I'm not really a teacher. I'm more like I want to program and fiddle around with how people process the world. So when you start thinking about programming, you're like a computer system that's programmed like an algorithm for certain things. How many of you would like to know what you're programmed for? Because if you know what you're programmed for, then you know how to go change the program, the root code. The way you know what you're programmed for is when you observe your thoughts, what do? Because when you observe them, they naturally shift and they align with your thinking. So if you observe a thought and the thought gets dangerous, you have bad programming. If you observe the thought and the thought gets positive, you have good programming. This is how you isolate what the programming is. So let's take an example. Let's say somebody has a, I'm going to go through, I'm going to pick one. I'm going to pick some random person. Hold on. Okay, Christina. Who do I think I am to coach people on management and leadership? When you observe that thought and you separate from it and you just mentally go like, oh, that's an interesting thought. What's your next thought? The next thought you have is the replacement for the previous thought. And that shows you your programming. Does this make sense or no? I'm way up in the stratosphere right now. I can bring it closer if we need to.
Yeah, keep going.
So let's say that we sit down and we're like, who am I to teach people on management and leadership? That's an interesting thought. Wonder why I thought that. And our next thought is like, well, you're just a kid with no experience and there's nothing about you that's special. Well, that's actually your programming showing itself. So you're programmed incorrectly. Versus if you sit down, you're like, well, that's an interesting thought. And then the next thought is like, yeah, that is a dumb thought. I've got just as much talent and intellect as everyone else who's teaching. That's different programming. This is the use of metacognition to go in and explore rather than to go in and fix. We're not fixing yet. We're just exploring. We're trying to find the program. And you can do this again and again and again. You work it down to the root code. So let's say we go back to the first one. Yeah, who am I? I'm just a kid. I don't have any experience. Oh, that's an interesting thought. Well, yeah, my dad tried to do this and he wasn't very successful, and it's because he didn't have any experience either. Oh, that's an interesting thought. Yeah, and then when I was a kid, my dad told me that if I didn't do X, Y, and Z, okay, now we've gotten to some root programming. Where did it come from? Who did it come from? Come on, talk to me. Lock in here.
Mm-hmm.
This example, who did it come from?
The dad.
The dad. So if it came from your bloodline, then we treat it differently than if it came from an experience that we had. But in this example, it's coming from the bloodline. It came from your dad. Did it come from your dad's programming? Probably not, because your dad did the same thing and it didn't work. So it probably came from his programming. If it comes from your parents' programming, it means it's in your bloodline. It's in your epigenetics. It's in your DNA. And this is where it starts to get really spiritual.
Yeah.
Because when something was baked into you, so think about this from a spiritual warfare point of view. Let's say, just for the purposes of time, let's say that we all believe the same things. Not necessarily in regards to God or Jesus, but let's say that we believe we have an adversary, we have an enemy, we have resistance, we have negative things that are coming against us. If that enemy is intelligent, is it easier for that enemy to give you a circumstance that's difficult or to program you for difficulty? What's less work and more leverage for that adversary? Program.
Yeah.
It's to program you.
Like embedding a virus in software.
100%. So rather than him making your life harder, he's probably going to go to your generation knowing that you're probably coming. And this is where people get all tripped up. And they're like, well, I don't believe in prophecy. Well, if you believe in astrology, you believe in prophecy. Just clear that up real fast. If you believe in stars, which hopefully all of you do, then you most likely believe in prophecy, because the stars and the planets, like, okay, people get on to me all the time. They're like, hey man, you're a Christian. How can you believe in astrology? Well, when the moon comes in, the tide changes. So if you know that the moon's coming in 2 days, do you believe the tide's going to change? Like, yeah, that's science. No, dumbass, that's prophecy. It's the same thing. You look at the signs and you tell the future based on the signs. I'm not talking about divination. I'm talking about basics. Have you ever heard this phrase like, oh, Mercury's in retrograde, ever prepare yourself?
Yeah.
People were like, that's demonic. No, there's a moon that's literally changing the gravitational pull of half the population. It makes a little bit of sense when you study it.
Yeah.
So programming from an epigenetic standpoint is when you have protective maneuvers that are baked into your instincts. So if your parents did something and it was painful, then they have a kid, that information is baked into the genetic code of the children. And we have to go undo that programming for us to remove resistance.